Tomm Moore, co-director of Wolfwalkers. This is another Celtic adventure that's also a historical fantasy. So how long have you wanted to tell this story?
It's been in the works for about 7 years. I was working on Song of the Sea when Ross and I came up with the idea, so it's been a while.
Mhm. There's like a historical lesson here about colonization. So what do you want uh, viewers to know about 17th century Ireland?
The way like Star Trek, it's kind of about now, even though it's set in the future. It's a
Mhm.
little bit more, I think it's more about now. I mean, we can kind of track back our polarization here in this country between Catholics and Protestants and all that stuff that I grew up with back 400 years to Oliver Cromwell colonizing the country or starting the colonization of the country. But I think it's all over the world. There's this polarization going on where people are feeling that there's the other that they should be afraid of or that, they're enemies. And, we lost our woodlands back then and we lost the wolves. And I think telling a story of a little English girl and a little Irish girl who managed to cross over that divide that society is putting on them and be friends anyway in order to save a habitat and to save the wolves, I think is something. It's for today's audience.
Mhm. And it's probably more timely now than you could have predicted when you started working on it,
It's
right?
depressingly timely. As we worked on it, we were watching especially the stuff around ecological. Well, that's not even true. The ecological theme and the polarization of society, just both those things became depressingly more and more prescient as we made the movie, Joyce. Yeah.
Mhm. Oh, this is in 2D and hand drawn. So, what do you love about hand drawn animation versus CG?
Yeah, I'm definitely calling this one hand drawn rather than 2D. Our previous movies were described as defiantly 2D because we played with very flat shapes and everything. But we went hand drawn with this, but there's a lot more depth than we usually use. Like we've a lot more moving cameras and things like that. But I think there's a timelessness and an expressiveness to hand drawn animation. Like I think we can speak in the language of illustration and painting and stuff. And I love all forms of animation. It's just that I love to draw, and the studio is filled with people who love to draw, and we just like to draw on, influences from comic books to historical art, and try and find a way to tell a story that can only be done with hand drawn.
Hmm. Was there any part of this process that you did do digitally?
Yeah, because the computer is woven into our lives so much, and ever since we started making these traditional films, we've had the computer as a helper, whether it's just joining up with our partner studios in France and Luxembourg over the internet, or whether it's how we color the characters. Maybe the weirdest thing is that a lot of times hand drawn seems to inform the final look that's done digitally. We're the other way around. So, for example, with the wolf vision, when we see the world through the eyes of the wolves, that's all built in CG first, and we get the camera move right. And that's just a reference then. That gets printed out and then frame by frame drawn on paper with pencils and charcoals by the team. So it's kind of using the digital technology to figure everything out and then using hand drawn to make the final look that's on screen.
Hmm. Yeah, that is one of like the striking aspects of the film. And what about like when like their wolf souls like leave their bodies? How did you animate that?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Like that's all hand-drawn effects animation, like at its root. Like everything we did, we tried to make it feel as if it could have been done, back in the 60s, 101 Dalmatians era. But we did use compositing, of course, to put the characters and the backgrounds together. And then for the effects, there was a lot of we could play with opacity and a lot of lighting effects and stuff in the compositing software. So yeah, the magic kind of had an extra glow, an extra edge to it that is added in the final stages of compositing. But it's all built up with layers and layers of hand drawn effects.
Hmm. Oh, one of the themes of the movie is the Puritanism of the Lord Protector versus nature, and you like do see that in the animation because the wolves' cave and the forest are very colorful and very lush greens and golds, and the
Mm.
lines always look like they're a little unfinished and like very
Mm,
ocean versus the town, and it's dreary and gray and very
mm,
geometric. It's like
mm.
a literal and a figurative cage. So, can you talk about the those two worlds?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of building on stuff that Ross and I had done in previous movies. Like Ross was art director on Secret of Kells, and he was concept artist on Song of the Sea, and we did a little section for The Prophet together. So we kind of were developing the visual language, and we kind of tried to bring it to its natural conclusion with this, where, we looked at the woodblock prints from the time period or the 101 Dalmatians background style, and that was kind of what we felt ultimately would suit the town. So it almost feels like maps and engravings from that time period when the country was kind of being carved up and marked out and sort of colonized in that way. And then for the forest, we went in the other direction and we went for that really unfinished, scratchy, watercolor, loose kind of expressiveness. And then the whole movie just kind of moves between those two extremes. We've kind of got a visual language on one side that's very geometric, and on the other side, it's very organic. And when our main character Robin travels from one world and one way of thinking and one point of view to another, the way she's drawn and the way she's represented changes too. And that was like a fun challenge because it was using as much as we could of the hand-drawn animation technique and skill set that we developed over the years in the studio.
Mm-hmm. I also like the contrast in Robin and Maeve's just their body types, because like you could see in the behind you, but like Robin is like a lot more angular, and Maeve is more round. So can you talk about conceptualizing that?
Yeah, that was really fun too, because Robin, we kind of pictured at the start as a little bit more kind of structured and divided. She's even when she puts up her hood, it's like a big diamond, like, or a big square on its side, and every part of her is kind of pulled tight. She's got braids, and she's kind of got like super long, gangly legs, like a adolescent wolf, with the kind of paws down at the bottom and high hips like that. So she's very sprightly and full of energy, but she's also very reserved and constricted by her worldview. And as she kind of gets to know Maeve, she gets roughed up by Maeve and gets bits bitten out of her cape, and gets branches and sticks and stuff in her hair, and eventually lets her plaits out and has long flowing hair and stuff. And then just in contrast, Maeve is really roughy tufty, like she's really close to the ground. Her center of gravity is low. Whether she's a wolf or a girl, she's kind of got those big big soft paws or big round hands, and her feet are always dirty, and her hair is just like a big ball of like ginger messy curls with lots of little, like almost like Gustav Klimt style, like just little bits of.
She's like a firecracker.
Yeah, but she's got like little branches and little leaves and stuff stuck in her hair, and they kind of show that she's just been dragged to, ditches and trees and bushes and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So, excuse me, how did you approach drawing their wolf versions? Because you still kind of see some of like their human forms in their wolf version.
Yeah, and a lot of the shape language and stuff and how they moved that we'd worked out in their human form, we tried to bring across into the wolf version. And we were really lucky. There was a couple of amazing like quadruped hand-drawn experts like James Baxter and Aaron Blaze, who did a bit of consultation and helped us with the design to make sure that our anatomy and stuff was good. But we also were very free with it. We were quite cartoony with it. They can move very fluidly when they're confident in their bodies. But yeah, their eyes give them away, and hopefully also how they move is similar between human and wolf form.
Mm-hmm. Did you always know that the leads would be two girls?
No, at the very beginning, I mean, I think there's a full draft of a script somewhere where Robin is a boy, and like a lot of things weren't working, but one really obvious thing was that we were inventing these obstacles for a little boy to come up against if he wanted to be a hunter in that time period, because he probably would have been encouraged, truth be told. And when we had the idea that it could be a little girl, it made so much sense, because a little girl, she almost just like it was just a flip of gender, but suddenly that character made sense because now as a little girl, the last thing that she would have been allowed to do was go out into the woods and be a hunter. She was going to be up against everything in that society that would be telling her what her place was compared to where she wanted to be. So that just made so much more sense. And then Maeve had a kind of counterpoint rather than a little boy like we'd already done in Secret of Kells and Song of the Sea. Maeve was meeting somebody who was her counterpoint, but just from a completely different society and worldview. So that relationship felt different and sparked a little bit better then.
Right. And especially for that time of like the mysticism and like, the magic of like turning into wolf, like they,
like a witch or something.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, there's something about matriarchy in the old pagan. Like the more deep I go into like the pre-Christian worldview in Ireland, the more it seems like more of a matriarchy. Like we had three goddesses, Eru, Bamba, and Macha, before we had like the Christian faith, and it somehow feels like there's something that speaks to that whenever you have two female leads.
yeah. So what are you working on now?
Me, I'm working on not doing anything. It's hard work. No, I'm working on life drawing. I'm taking a year off just to focus on life drawing and try and find a new direction. But I can only do that because the studio is so busy. Nora Toomey, my partner in the studio, is directing a feature called My Father's Dragon for Netflix, which is a huge challenge. And then there's this TV show called Puff and Rock that I co-created years ago on Netflix, but we're doing a feature film version of that, which is kind of dealing with climate change and climate refugees, but in a very gentle way for like little like 3 to 5 year olds. So those projects are exciting and they're coming along great.
Nice. Well, Tomm, thank you so much for being with us today. It was great speaking with you, and we'll see you back here in a little bit.
Thanks, Joyce.
Thank you.